So the first restart, the second start of the race, was actually fairly clean by everyone. There was a little contact at turn 3 between De Vries and Ocon, De Vries forcing Ocon a little wide. But in the grand scheme of this Grand Prix, we're going to gloss over that. It was fairly static. The action really begins again with Kevin Magnussen running wide in the Haas. So K-Mag has Zhou behind him, and he's finally broken Zhou away from the DRS zone that he's had. And we know how powerful the DRS was. If you were a slower car, you could get within a second of faster cars and just be dragged along with these 4 DRS zones. Gasly was doing it beautifully behind Carlos Sainz for the Grand Prix. Hulkenberg momentarily behind Perez as well. It was really working. So K-Mag's chuffed that he's finally managed to shake off Zhou, but it's all for nothing, because he comes through here, gets to turn 2 and just drifts wide into that wall. And he just touches it really quite gently on the right rear, but it's enough to break the rim. The tyre pops off and K-Mag is coming down towards retirement. On the face of it, it's pretty nothingy at this point. Magnussen's in control of the car, still on 3 wheels. He pulls it off, and he pulls it off down here in a very, very responsible position. On the apex of turn 4, there's a marshal's post, and they can push the car back in behind that. It's pretty decent parking from K-Mag, and all in all, it's a kind of nothing incident from him. Maybe a bit sloppy, maybe a bit greedy, trying to just move too much to the outside of the racing line, get the throttle on too early. Didn't look like he was fighting the car too much either. But it changes the outcome of the race. And now, should it have changed the outcome of the race quite as much as it did? Well, there's a bit of debris on the track, and there's clearly this tyre that's still hovering on the circuit. So you need to have some sort of safety car or a virtual safety car, but also, here's your marshal's post here. This wasn't planned, but the tyres ended up in an almost perfect place for a marshal to go and retrieve it very, very quickly. Magnussen parked in a really good spot because actually, it might have known in 2018 when Haas were having all sorts of nightmares with their tyres and, the wheels weren't going on at the pit stop properly. Gunther Steiner was making enraged phone calls to Gene Haas explaining what was going on. But Magnussen pulled off in pretty much an identical position back in 2018 when all this was happening. And he was out of 4th place at the time in this Grand Prix. So he's got previous at using this bit of runoff for getting out of it. And Charlie Whiting was race director at this time. And this was actually covered just with a yellow flag, not even a VSC, to get Magnussen's car out of harm's way here. It was quite a long way off the racing line. And actually, it looked like he was maybe parked in a better place this year than he was even in 2018. So fundamentally, did we need a red flag at the end of the race? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say this could have been dealt with a safety car, maybe even a VSC, just to pick up the tyre, pick up the Haas behind the barriers, and it all would have been okay. And that was the cause for a lot of debate amongst drivers, amongst fans. And I can understand both sides of the argument here. The key thing is, if there was a safety car, then we would have finished under safety car. And that is what F1 is trying to avoid a little bit more. And you can't really win in these situations. Finishing under safety car, no one likes that. It's maybe the fairest way for it to be. And from a sporting argument, there'll definitely be old lovers of the sport that have seen so many races finish under safety car. And from a sporting argument, that is the way that maybe it should have gone. But in an era of trying to spice up the action a little bit, we've got sprint races, we've got standing starts for wet races as well now, then throwing a red flag gives us a chance to finish under racing speed. And that is what, when you've got huge record crowds everywhere, that's fundamentally what people want to see. So it's an entertainment v sport debate. I can see both sides of the argument, but I wasn't against the idea of having a red flag and letting them fight it out from where they were at the end of this part with Magnussen stopping. I wasn't against the idea of that because I think it's more entertaining fundamentally. The FIA are in their rights to throw a red flag. They were working according to their own rules. Maybe for the sport, it's not the absolute purest, the fairest thing, but that's how it was. So fundamentally, we get to this part, a restart with 2 laps to go. And this is where all hell breaks loose, basically. So here we go. The drama is going to start as we go through here with the battle for 4th. And it's Sainz v Gasly. These two are the instigators for the chaos that ensues here. So they're fighting each other down towards turn 1, and they're kind of playing chicken. It's really difficult to get a gauge on some tyres that are now no longer up to proper working temperature, but they're soft tyres and they should come up to temperature pretty quickly, but they're still missing the peak. you're on low fuel. You never really do a start on low fuel. So it's really difficult to gauge how deep you can go on the brakes, and it's 2 laps to go. If you're cautious, you lose a place, you may well never get it back. So it's the risk versus reward. It's like a sprint race, but in the absolute purest sense, 2 laps and for full points. And Gasly and Sainz basically dupe each other into braking too late. The top 3 have got it under control. Perez is going to do a little bit the same behind with Lance Stroll as well. And it's these two, Gasly and Sainz, that are a little bit out of control, given they've got cars ahead. And Gasly is very lucky not to smash into the back of Alonso here, pick up his penalty points and get a race ban for Baku. Sainz does hit Fernando Alonso. There's the contact. And Alonso kind of minding his own business here, quite well ahead of Sainz coming into the corner. Yes, he could be a tiny bit further out on the line that Hamilton's on, but fundamentally he's allowed to choose his line. He's allowed to do as he is. Sainz is coming in, steaming in, out of control, and causes the collision. It's not Alonso's fault at all. It's Sainz's fault. And Alonso is sent spinning out and actually hits the barrier with enough force that I've seen cars brake with that as well, on the right rear. And he's very lucky to rejoin in the Grand Prix here. So as Alonso's going off, you've now got this battle for third. Sainz is still there, and Stroll is just gained 3 places in the Aston Martin. He's got a chance of a podium out of absolutely nowhere. But then he's going to do exactly the same thing, basically, down at turn 3. The two of them playing dare on the brakes. And actually, Stroll doesn't look like he brakes too hard. He just doesn't brake with enough force. So the car doesn't slow down initially. Then he's playing straight on towards the gravel. Bit of a lock-up as he finally realises, hey, I've got to stop this car at some point. And what's gone from a 6th place finish to suddenly a podium goes out the window as he heads straight off into the gravel himself. Now, cold tyres, colder tyres, and they're just difficult to gauge your braking point when all these corners, these big braking zones, are so critical. On top of this, for the drivers into turn 1 and turn 3, there's sun in your eyes. And in Australia, it's so tricky when the sun's going down to see what's going on. And it's right in your eyes into 1 and 3. And so I'm going to put that in the mix as to why drivers were struggling to find their braking point at this late restart. We can see it on board with Carlos here. We're going to see the collision that he causes and gets penalised for. But also, as a point of exemption, you can see here you're in the shade, then you come out of it, and there's quite blinding sunlight for the drivers to contend with. You're trying to pick a braking reference, and it's critical with only one more lap after this one to settle your final position. So there are probably causes or reasons why we had so much kind of silliness, or looks like silliness, at this final start. And maybe just the cold tyres, don't really know where you're braking on low fuel, and blinding sunlight as well really makes a big difference. But we can see Sainz then. He comes in and quite a whack with Fernando, and that is his penalty coming for that one. Stroll then comes through. Stroll has a huge slide coming through turn 2. And we've now got one Aston Martin in the wall, and Sainz is going to just dummy this one into pretty much joining Fernando out of the points here and go straight on. So Carlos has dealt with one at turn 1, dummied the other one at turn 3, but it's all going to come for nothing because whilst the grid was pretty much reset, Carlos was a major loser here because he picked up a 5-second penalty for the collision with Fernando. And many people upset about this, no more than Carlos, who has described it as the most unfair penalty he's ever seen in his life, way over the top. And I think it was a fair penalty, honestly, for Sainz. Let's take it back to Austin. There's your pole man, Carlos Sainz. And some people are saying that lap in Melbourne, it counts. Another lap went through, and whilst the grid was reset, the Alpines never got a chance to come back and get any points. The ramifications for incidents that happened stand. And actually, Sainz was the instigator for a lot of the melee that did happen later on. So the lap counts, and then you're looking at the incident. And some people are saying, well, lap 1 incidents are a little bit, normally they're dealt with a little bit more lenient. But your pole man, Sainz here, is going to have a kind of pretty similar incident with George Russell, who's the Mercedes on the inside there. So Russell is going to have a bit of a pop. He's looking at Hamilton. They're trying to outbrake each other into turn 1 in Austin. Sainz has already lost the lead. And as he comes through, you've got Russell now fighting with Hamilton. And Russell, as Sainz, like Fernando Alonso in Melbourne, could go wider here and save himself. But he doesn't. He doesn't have to do that. He can choose the line that he wants to do. So Russell comes in, steams into the left rear of Sainz, spins him round, and picks up a 5-second penalty. The exact same penalty that Carlos got in Melbourne. And Sainz actually thought that Russell got away with that one lightly. So there's got to be some balance here somewhere. I can understand why Carlos was upset, because the safety car finish meant that the 5 seconds knocked him out of the points completely. It was actually very close in the end to scraping something, but didn't. But that's just how it goes. If you have a penalty and there's a safety car, your penalty is going to be really, really worsened. And that was luck of the draw for Sainz. Fundamentally, he made the mistake. He caused the contact. Could have put Fernando out of the race. It didn't. But still a slam dunk penalty. And I don't think he's got a leg to stand on, to be honest.
So we have 5 seconds penalty. No, it cannot be, Ricky. Do I deserve to be out of the points? No. No, yeah. It's unacceptable. Tell them, it is unacceptable. They need to wait until the race is finished and discuss with me.
So that's Sainz. Penalty, no points. But the other big losers from this restart were Alpine, particularly Gasly. And again, Gasly could kind of blame himself into this first corner because we picked them up again. Sainz and Gasly, the instigators at the front for some drama. Gasly goes in way too deep. He's not got the tyre temp on the front. He's outbraked himself, and he's going to potentially go into the rear of Alonso. Just about avoids him and can breathe a sigh of relief as he bounces over the grass. Alonso gets tipped by Sainz, and now Gasly's rejoining off the road to into the path of Ocon. Everyone sweeps around, and then Ocon fancies a little look to the outside of Gasly, and we're going to get the contact. So we jump on board with Esteban Ocon, and you can see how the starts were played out behind. It was a lot more measured for these guys. Ocon running in the points, and they're on the brakes. Hülkenberg ahead, Norris ahead. These guys are under control. You've got a chancy Yuki Tsunoda on the right-hand side there, and they all make it through. Alonso there is spinning out, and now Ocon sees a chance to go to the outside of Gasly. There is space here for Ocon to go around the outside of Gasly. Pierre's just been on the grass. He's bouncing back on, and he's going to come across the width of the track. And Ocon is here. He's got an overlap. He has the space here. He should have the space. But I wonder if Gasly either doesn't see him because, again, the light is pretty bad to look in front. It's even harder to look in your mirrors at this point. So that could be an extenuating circumstance for Gasly coming all the way across the track. Or he's just so caught out by the grass, he's flustered, he's not looking in his mirrors because he doesn't appear to be. But he just comes across, and Ocon loses the space here, and they have contact. It's a big whack, both Alpines into the wall. That is really, really heavy contact. So no points, major repairs. The cost of that's not going to be pleasing anyone at Alpine. And it's a really costly one. Teammates coming together is worst case. It's also particularly not good for these two when people were already wondering if they'd get on or not before this season. Race 3 and they've come to major blows. But I'm going to put this one down to Pierre fundamentally as well, because not only has he gone in too deep at turn 1, but he's then come back on, come across the width of the track, and effectively he's put his teammate in the wall. Now at Alpine, they went to the stewards and they obviously had a game plan to make sure that neither driver got penalty points and Gasly didn't get a race ban for picking up penalty points. So in that case, you both just go in and you say, it was my fault, sir, and you get away with it. The stewards can't pin the blame on anyone if both drivers take the fault. But I think this is on Gasly. He comes through and now he's got to just leave enough space for a car that's got an overlap on his outside. And he just doesn't. He just drifts out towards the right-hand side. He's already had the contact there. But at this point, he's just drifting, letting the car move to the outside. You've got to be aware on the first lap, particularly when you're coming back from the grass, that there could be a driver there. I think he's very lucky to get away with, first of all, the not hitting Alonso. Second of all, this major wipeout with his teammate. Alpine lose out majorly with that. It's a shame for Pierre because whilst I think these two, he was a little bit out of control at the restart, he had driven a superb race and a superb weekend. So there's confidence he can take from that, but it came to nothing right at the end.
I don't have anything to say. I'm just extremely disappointed and just want to remember the positive. We didn't expect to be fighting one Ferrari and to have Alonso in my sights for most of the race. So that's what we remember the rest. I just have no comment for now, and I'm way too disappointed to be standing here and looking these guys doing one lap.
Can I ask you about...
I'm fine, sorry.
There's one more crash at this restart, and it's one for the blooper reel of Logan Sargent. Starting towards the back, he gets a fairly poor getaway, and now he's completely at the back as De Vries comes through. last coming into the first corner with some margin to the cars ahead. And I'm not quite sure what's going on here for Logan, but again, doesn't press the brake nearly hard enough initially, then realises he's going in too deep, cars everywhere ahead, and immediately cranks on a load of steering lock in a bit of a panic. And the best way to slow down the car is to keep yourself in a straight line, and that will avoid a lockup. But in turning hard left and then applying the brakes is just going to instigate a lockup. That's what happens, and now he's ploughing into the back of De Vries, and it's an absolute wipeout from the Williams into the AlphaTauri. We could put this one down as a rookie error from Sargent. Sloppy rookie, again, difficult conditions with the late restart. Maybe a bit of fatigue in there as well at the end of a really long Australian Grand Prix. But that one is 100% on Sargent, just missed his braking point, couldn't slow the car down, and in the heat of the moment didn't quite react in the best way either to avoid the crash. He's a rookie, it's only race 3 for him. But what's more bizarre is that he got away with that one without a penalty. The stewards didn't even look into this, and whilst De Vries is out of the Grand Prix, Sargent probably should have had a grid penalty for the next race in Baku, but maybe the stewards had a flight to catch. There's so much going on in that race. They seemed to ignore that one, which was a bit bizarre. But Sargent didn't get away with it on the day, but will get away with it when he turns up to Baku.
I have never seen a more frantic start in Formula One.
Final thing to say on this, I know what people would be thinking. A red flag, 2-lap dash to the end. Of course, there's going to be incident. You're asking for it pretty much. Well, we've had it in the past and there's not been incident. This was Baku 2021. Now we know a famous thing that happens at the start of this one. Lewis Hamilton leaves his brake magic on and he's going to go straight on at the first corner in what was a fairly colossal mistake in that season. But actually, if you look through the rest of this pack, it's not completely jumbling up the order, throwing a late red flag. You've got your winner there, second place there, third was Gasly there, and fourth. They're all in the same order. So it's not a complete lottery having a red flag at the end. It allows a bit of entertainment for the fans, for the whole sport right at the end, but it doesn't completely shuffle the pack. In fact, the previous restart in Melbourne, we would have had the order of 1, 2 and 3 as they were on the grid, and we would have had it in the final restart as well, had Sainz not gone in too hot and Gasly as well, and instigated the crash. So it's up to the drivers really not to get it wrong. In this case, Hamilton outbrakes himself, but that's the only change there. And we had one in Mugello as well in 2020. Another start late on, 12 laps to go in this one, but it was a full restart. And Ricciardo's got ahead of Bottas there in the Renault and the Mercedes up front. But everyone gets through it pretty cleanly, and your finishing order is not massively different as a result of having this restart. And this is Mugello, where there's a really, really long run down to that first corner, so it makes a bigger difference. The main thing is it's got to be consistent. We had, in Baku 2021, a red flag and a 2-lap sprint to the finish. Monza last year saw a safety car finish to the disappointment of fans. Here we have a 2-lap shootout and a lot of chaos, and then another red flag afterwards, which had its own question marks, where it could have finished under safety car even then. So it's just about being consistent, really, for the FIA. If they don't want to finish races under the safety car, I'm down for that. I think that makes the sport fundamentally more interesting, more entertaining, and we've got to move with the times. But it's got to be communicated with everyone, so we're all on the same page. And then fundamentally, it's up to the drivers not to make big mistakes then into turn one and ruin theirs or other people's races.
It was very chaotic today, a bit of a mess, to be honest. Especially the second red flag, I think that was really unnecessary today. That could have easily been solved with a virtual safety car or a safety car at most. But yeah, we got that red flag, and then you basically create even more trouble, because then you go out on very cold tires. The safety car is driving super slow, and you arrive, to the grid with stone cold tires. And you could see everyone in turn one was having a lot of trouble, and especially the cars in dirty air. They, nobody crashes on purpose, but everyone went wide or had a touch, and yeah, it was just very chaotic.